Hi everyone, and welcome to the What the Fuck show. Tonight we're talking about body autonomy, and with Will and I tonight we have Susan from Divine Disbelief. Hi Susan.
Hello.
And the ever lovely Kitty the Atheist. Hi Kitty.
Hey.
We'll probably have a few more people drop in. There's been a few links set out and a few people said they wanted to be part of this but are not here yet.
Awesome.
One of them has electricity problems, so we don't know if Jenny Morgan's going to make it or not at the moment.
But,
how is everyone today?
I got to leave work at like noon because it's like gonna snow here today, like tonight. So, well, I don't know if you've ever seen me talk in the chat. I'm in Portland.
I used to live there. I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
It's like out of all the places I lived, it's just a love of mine. It's just one of those cities I fell in love with.
Oh yeah, it's amazing here, and it's like I was talking to Nathaniel earlier, and he's still at work. He's at work for another half an hour, and he's probably gonna get home in about 2 hours because there's like ice building up and stuff, and nobody knows how to drive in the snow and the ice. So.
At all.
Yeah.
At all. When's the last time that it snowed there? Did they
About
have
2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So it's a frequent thing. When I lived there, in 3, almost 4 years, it snowed once.
Yeah, this is one of those like it's supposed to be a once in a decade sort of things. So it's like this is great.
You can make a snowman.
No one knows what they're doing.
The corgis are going to go outside and
I saw a meme today which started off, "Do you want to build a snowman?" And it goes, "No, I want to go to the beach and build a fucking sandcastle. I hate snow."
That's just perfect.
I mean, did you see there was like 100-car pileup in Texas? It was like the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. It was on 35 West, I think, going northbound. I used to live, like, before we moved here, Nathaniel and I lived in DFW. So it's like, I would drive that shit all the time. Like, oh my God.
So do you think it's
confirmed dead?
It's a warm weather thing where warm weather people can't drive, or...
Oh yeah, yeah.
You want to
Texas
see?
Is... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say if you want to see massive fatalities, let it snow like for realsies in Florida.
when it hails here, we call it snow. That's how starved we are in the LA County area. That's how starved we are.
That's what it's like in Albany. There was a hailstorm down there last year. And it literally blanketed the ground in hail to the point where it looked like the ground was covered in snow. But it was just hailstones. It was not snow.
Oh, damn.
Same thing happened in South LA and people freaked out.
Yeah. No one freaked out. But there were all these people going and making hailstone snowmen. Because you live in a place that doesn't snow, well, you take advantage of what you're given.
Yeah.
I know, like, I mean, I live in Florida, and I don't think I've ever seen snow. Like, we've gotten frost on the ground, and we've gotten large hailstones, but supposedly it snowed in Florida when I was a little kid, but it was, like, before we lived here. Because I'm originally from Massachusetts, so, like, they know snow.
Before we go too off topic, because I can go off about weather.
Yeah.
I'm not even in the geeky sense.
Weather autonomy.
So, does anybody want to start? I'll start. Let me get my notes.
You've been that organized this week?
No, we go from the fun stuff, and I want to go straight to the 13th and 14th Amendment. straight from the weather to actually being free, like having a piece of paper say that you're free, you know, because like I said earlier, as a man, it's I don't feel it's my place to tell anyone to do with their body, you know, besides protect themselves, you know. So I was trying to look for something besides to talk about the other soft subject about male prostitution, you know. Talking about body autonomy, you know.
Well, I think it really starts at, and this ties into Nathaniel and I have a big thing with like sex ed and comprehensive sex ed and stuff. And
that's a bad choice of wording. That is.
Yeah, that really was my bad. We speak on comprehensive sex ed. And then there we go. It's better.
Yeah, that's
better. But part of that is teaching kids about consent and it starts from a very, very young age, and teaching them that their body is their own, and that if they don't want somebody to touch them, they can tell them, because their body is their own.
Very much so. Very much
so.
It
can start very young.
I have a son, and for as long as he could remember, I kind of told him, like, no one's allowed to touch you, and I just kind of left it at that, and like you said, I think it's comprehensive sex education from a young age. When I was a kid, we got the video in the 6th grade, and that was it. And it was, this is what you have, these are your bits, and that was it.
Well, I mean, honestly, though, if you want to keep yourself from sleeping, for the next lifetime, look up the statistics on children with autism and disabilities and mental handicaps, and the higher likelihood they are to be sexually abused and molested. That will keep you up at night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's terrifying. That just the idea that there are people out there who are willing to prey on the weak because they feel, or I'm sorry, that's really bad phrasing, on the who are perceived as weak. I'm sorry, yes. that was bad phrasing on my part. I'm sorry. Just that it's just gut wrenching. It really is.
Absolutely, and because I work in the field. How's it going? Junie, how you doing, Purple?
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Because I work in the field, that's something that we teach people with disabilities, even teenagers, adults. We're constantly reiterating, no one's allowed to touch you. People keep their hands to themselves when you're at the workplace, because people with disabilities do get taken advantage in any way that somebody could, that you could possibly think of. I won't go into it too deep because it's not what we're talking about, but places like the Goodwill only pays them half of what they would pay anybody else. And here in California, they get a legal label on it, and they could pay people with disabilities half of what, anybody else would make.
Which is absolutely fucked up because,
That's why I bring it up whenever I can. It's one of those.
We should do a stream on that.
It's one of those annoying things that I constantly bring up because even here in super lefty California, they can legally get away with that, and I don't think they should, especially because we have $15 minimum wage here. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah, unfortunately, people with a disability are an exception to the federal minimum wage.
Is there a precedent or a law because of that?
There is a law for that, and that's how Goodwill and the Salvation Army get away with it. Because it's part of the sort of affirmative action hiring thing, that if they're giving jobs to people who they think normally couldn't get jobs, they don't have to pay them minimum wage.
It's basically an incentive to hire differently abled people.
Well, that's what's supposed to be, but in the end, it winds up that the people who have some type of disability wind up getting screwed for it.
Yeah, sorry,
so it doesn't end up being necessarily a minimum wage for everybody.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But let's be real. If a corporation could cut any corner, if they could rip anybody off, nickel and dime anybody in any way, they'll do it. Even when Safeway is like, hey, can we have your change? I'm like, no, you may not have my change. No, you may not.
That's because corporations are amoral. They have a fiduciary duty to make money for their shareholders. They don't care who they have to hurt or crush or disenfranchise, or kill, even if they can get away with it and not have to pay out the lawsuits. And even then, sometimes they'll do the cost benefit of it's cheaper to pay out the lawsuits than to do a recall and not have people dying.
Our sheriff's department is like that. They'd rather pay a lawsuit than actually obey the law. It's funny when people become these big conglomerates, But I do have a question. Do you guys, do you think technology hurts or helps body autonomy? And I'm talking about like increasing surveillance. Now, whatever religion they can go on the internet and repress and suppress you right from in your living room. Do you think it helps or hurts?
I think the internet helps because it allows people to find each other
and information.
Yeah.
But I mean, it also can be a negative effect, especially if you're in environments like Facebook and Twitter, where you've got, if you're an example of that, if you're a young person who's gotten pregnant, for whatever means cannot carry that child, and doesn't want to, you have a right to, you have a right to an abortion, regardless of what other people's opinions on abortions are. But if you go looking for help and you ask for help in somewhere like Facebook or Twitter, the number of people with ideas that are in conflict to your own body autonomy is going to be horrendous. And the stigma you could face from that could be enough to turn somebody away from actually getting help and proper advice, because Twitter and Facebook are not the place to look for advice.
Especially
we all know that. I mean, we might ask advice of each other because we're friends, but you wouldn't just put a post out in general Twitter going, "Hey guys, I'm having this happen. Can I get some advice?" Because you just wouldn't. It'd be like walking in the pub and going, "I've got this growth on my foot. Can somebody help me with it?"
I'm not going to ask somebody on Twitter to do a mole. No, you don't ask people on Twitter to do a mole check.
No.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, whenever I do see posts like that where somebody is looking for advice, and like I see somebody like latch onto that of, you should have the baby, give it up for adoption, like I have to comment. Like, my first thing is, are you going to pay all of her are you going to adopt the child? Are you going to pay all the medical expenses? Are you going to make sure that she has insurance and prenatal care? No, then sit the fuck down and shut the fuck up. But also, it's beyond just that. I mean, pregnancy is dangerous. In fact, it used to be the leading cause of death for women, dying in childbirth. Even in the modern age, fetal and maternal mortality rates are, it's still a thing.
High.
And considering modern medicine, they are shockingly high.
Oh,
especially for women of color.
Oh, well, anybody of a lower income demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you don't have the money, I mean, especially in your country, in America, where your ability to get healthcare is highly attached to how much money you earn.
You gotta have a wallet biopsy first.
One of the scariest articles I've ever read in Scientific American, it was called, if you're a person of color, don't get cancer. That was like the title of the article, and I sat there and I'm like, oh crap. So basically it goes by income in America, but disproportionately people of color are affected. You know,
as if somebody has a choice of that.
A good video to watch. John Oliver, fucking love him. He's amazing. He did a video on medical bias and how there are doctors that still believe outdated and racist tropes about people of color, like that they have higher pain tolerances and that their skin is thicker and all these other things. And it leads to bias in practice where, not only those misinformation, tropes where they won't give pain medicine, but also the stereotype of, oh, they're just drug seeking. And there was a woman just recently with COVID. She was a doctor, a Black woman doctor, and she, was in the hospital with COVID. She could barely breathe. She's recording a video saying, they're trying to send me home. She is struggling to breathe. And the doctor's like, nah, you're fine. You're free to go. We're gonna discharge you. She's like, look, I am a doctor. I am not okay. And she was asking for something for the pain she was in. She was telling him, I am in pain. I cannot breathe. A fucking doctor. They sent her home and she fucking died. If a doctor who knows what to say, knows the treatments, and knows how to advocate for themselves ends up in that situation, then anybody who's not a fucking doctor and is a person of color, you guys are fucked.
I can't speak to that as you would as Will could as a person of color, but I can speak to it because there's a similar thing for trans people, and it's been it's been named the trans health condition now. And what it is doctors so experienced with dealing with trans people. A trans person walks in with a problem, the doctor automatically assumes it's something to do with their transition, either from taking hormones or doing something else. And I know people who went to the doctor because they broke their arm, and the doctor started talking about maybe you should come off your hormones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because of the ignorance of the knowledge. They were trying to say that you taking female hormones was going to make your bones more brittle, which isn't true.
Well, and unfortunately, that's a problem anyone who's overweight winds up facing. That if they go into a doctor, the first thing is the doctor's always going to say whatever is wrong is based on their weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of they would rather guess and give you whatever drug the pharmaceutical company is paying them to push out at the time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of it's with the healthcare plans, the doctors are limited, literally, that the doctors will be told they're not allowed to spend more than 15 minutes with each patient to keep on schedule.
Yes.
So the doctors just want to identify something quick and get out of there.
And more with somebody who has like government assistance like Medicaid or Medicare.
Very true.
I mean, I realize it's worse for anyone in the US because your healthcare system sucks. But I mean, even in Australia, you will get the same things if you're overweight, if you're a trans person. If you fit into a minority, doctors will think that being part of a minority or a demographic is the whole reason why you're ill, when you might have the common cold, which is just ridiculous.
Yep. Well, and another thing that the U.S. has thrown into it now is saying that it's okay for healthcare professionals not to do something if it violates their religion. So literally, if a woman was in the ER and she was pregnant and dying and would need an abortion to save her life, the doctor can say, no, abortion's against my religion, and refuse to do anything.
Which I'm
sorry,
understand.
that's against the Hippocratic Oath. Fuck you, fuck your religion,
Exactly.
don't be a doctor.
Exactly.
Or a pharmacist. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a controversial opinion on this. I don't necessarily have a problem with the doctor saying I won't do a particular type of treatment, provided that doctor isn't the only doctor that's available for the patient. If the and that doctor isn't prepared to charge the patient for showing up to that appointment, the doctor should not charge if they're now going to refuse to treat.
Yeah, but
that's the problem. There are too many situations where the patient doesn't have a choice to go somewhere else.
No, and if they don't have a choice, I don't think the doctor should either.
And we shouldn't excuse the behavior. I think too much we give people too much room. Like if you feel this way, then you shouldn't be in a ER. You shouldn't be near a hospital or people in general. So if your religious convictions stop you from performing an abortion, you shouldn't be anywhere near somewhere where you have to.
It's like an Amish pilot refusing to fly a plane. Dude, you knew going into this.
Yeah.
You knew going into this. Nay, you do not. You do not get to say, no, I'm not going to do this, because people's lives are on the line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even with
I love, and this is I'm sorry.
Oh, go right ahead.
I was going to say, you know what I love, and I actually love, is that there is a woman in Texas. I'm pretty sure she's in Texas. I think she's probably in the Austin area. That is part of the Satanic Temple, or Church of Satan, Satanic Temple, one or the other. I don't remember which. And she's saying, hey, by not letting me have an abortion, you're fucking with my religious beliefs and my religious rituals and stuff. So she's like taking that to court and stuff. It's gonna get thrown out because it's Texas, but it's like
Texas is such a frustrating.
But it shows the hypocrisy. If you can throw that out because it's religious, you should throw out all other arguments that are religious.
That's
the governor of Texas has thrown out a thing that he's going to have them take a vote to secede from the union.
Bye.
Which, what that would mean is that without those 26 electoral votes, the Democrats will win every election for the next 20 years.
California's so blue you can see it from outer space. No, because people always, I always say, I live in a Republican town. Like, where I live is the last bastion of angry people in California. Like if you looked at the map, my little tiny town was red and everything else was blue, you know. So California's not changing for a while.
Well, that's pretty much how I am in Minnesota. This is probably the biggest city in Minnesota that has a Republican representative.
Oh, wow. You know, and that leads me to another thing. Religion has had a grip on our bodies for so long. Now that we're finally in the modern era, what is your biggest gripe with religions nowadays and bodily autonomy? I'm going, yeah, okay.
The purity culture, and the shame surrounding anything having to do with exercising autonomy and stuff. And like, you know, if specifically for young girls that are Christian, you know, they're taught that they're dirty, that they're less than. I mean, and that sort of has to do with like the abstinence only sex ed and stuff. But they're taught that, like, Christians in general are taught that they're like unworthy and stuff like that. But Christ, it's like they just make it so much worse on girls, and
that some doctors believe for anything to do with reproductive health, an adult woman needs her husband's permission.
Oh,
yeah, I can't get my tubes tied because I haven't had kids and I'm not married, even though I'm 34 years old. Yeah, I'm 34 years old.
Yeah.
And is this only in the state of Oregon, or is this just in?
Well, that was the last time I tried in Texas.
Oh, okay.
So that explains a lot.
Okay.
It's similar in Florida. Unless you've had multiple children, if you're young and not married, they do not want to allow you the autonomy to say, I want no kids. So the only reason they allowed me is because I had complications with my pregnancy. It was a high risk pregnancy, had to be a planned C-section. So they knew going in it was going to be a big deal. So they allowed me to do it, even though I was not married at the time and had not had multiple children. I think you need 3 before, 3 in your early 20s, and then they'll let you do it. But if you don't have at least 3 kids and are not married, good luck.
I know that's the same for guys as well, because I know somebody who was in their 20s a guy who didn't want kids and went to the doctor to what's the thing where they do the tubes? Vasectomy, that's it. And the doctor said, no, not until you're over 30.
What is over 30?
That's more rare.
Yeah, I know. What does 30 got to do with it? Well, you might change your mind, but it's reversible.
Yeah.
What's that, Purple? What's that?
Well, I haven't heard of men running into that, but my fiance had growths on the uterus that were causing her chronic pain, and when we were consulting with the surgeon, he was asking me, are you okay with this? And I'm like, why the fuck are you asking me? She's in pain. It's her decision.
You see, I've traveled around a lot, but I guess I've been more in the hospital here in California. That doesn't happen here. They don't ask the man anything. They won't even speak to you about a woman, about somebody else's body, about anyone's body, It's just strange. It just seems so foreign to me that somebody else can tell you what to do with your body.
I mean, there are states where you can't get an abortion without the father's permission.
I always thought it was states like Alabama, Mississippi. We could go down the line. I know in Florida, if you want to get an abortion, they force you to have an invasive and not necessary transvaginal ultrasound. They basically take an ultrasound wand, giant dildo, and they shove it in you. And they make you look at the ultrasound before, and they are uncomfortable. I've had to have them before because, ovarian cysts and other health issues. But it is a non-necessary medical procedure that is traumatizing.
Yep.
And they make you look at they make you sit there for an ultrasound before they will let you go get an abortion.
That is
all to try to guilt you into not
like
doing it.
They do in Texas, because in Texas they'll explain it to the patient and stuff.
I'm not entirely sure.
I'm going to cross the subject into abuse of intersex people because of being intersex, and 4 surgeries at birth. But something worse that I learnt about the other day, there were 3 intersex athletes who were looking at taking part in the 2012, that was London Olympics. And the IAAF Athletics Foundation, before approving them to try out to compete because they were intersex, insisted that they all had invasive surgery to remove traits from themselves that could have been perceived as masculine.
I remember reading about that.
2 of them went through the surgeries. One of those surgeries included a shortening of the clitoris.
What the fuck?
Nope.
Now I'm like,
that's like that
these
reminds
people.
me of
What the hell
Tears
has
of the
cosmetics got to do about whether or not these people are allowed to compete in the Olympics to start off with? That's just fucking ridiculous.
You have to mutilate yourself. You have to mutilate yourself to be in the Olympics.
Yes, basically
I would tell them to go
they told
stuff it.
these women that they had to mutilate themselves to be allowed in the Olympics.
Wow.
I thought what mattered was
that's an invasion of body autonomy.
Right, Junie, that's what I thought too.
What was that, Junie?
What's in your pants? Come on.
Right.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember the names of the athletes. I was reading it in a thread the other day and I checked them up, but I will have to find that and I might put the link below later. But it is absolutely disgusting. And that is, 8 years ago, basically. Oh, probably 9 years by the time when they were asked to do it and have the surgeries and stuff like that. But that is just ridiculous. I mean, even Castasima with because she has naturally higher than normal testosterone, you have to suppress your testosterone to be allowed to compete. Why? And
they exploited her on purpose.
Oh yeah, because they wanted to exploit her to make the attack on trans women. So if you're going to hold her, you have to hold this other bar, and it's as far as I'm concerned, the arguments in sport for trans women are ridiculous, but then it's not part of this conversation. But there are aspects of that thing for trans women that are the same, in that you will hear that people argue that against trans people from being able to have the surgeries to have their bodies feel comfortable because, oh, no, you're not allowed to modify your body like that. Well, I'm sorry, that's body autonomy, especially if you're talking about a fucking adult.
It's your fucking body.
But even for
nobody
a
should have a right to
child...
say what you do with it but you.
But even for a child who's more uncomfortable in that body that they're in, and you're talking about forcing them to make changes to their body by going through what would be considered the normal puberty...
But even in
that's
the UK,
unfair too, because you're doing something, you're forcing them to have something that's now going to make them exceptionally uncomfortable. I've heard people make the argument that, if you're going to allow people to transition, maybe we should just allow anorexics to become ultra thin and die. And I go, well, there's 2 different things. Trans people having their surgeries to change themselves is life preserving. Giving people therapy so that they're no longer anorexic is life-preserving. This is not conversion therapy like if you try to convert a trans person, because the surgeries and the hormones that you have are not threatening their life. Refusing those things to them is. But if you don't give therapy to somebody who's anorexic and you let them just continue to lose weight, they will die. So you're preserving life by giving them therapy. The therapy is the only option in that case, unless, of course, you're including an option is putting them in hospital and force-feeding them.
And this also
which
brings
is
me
not
to...
humane.
And another point, in the UK, they have the Gender Recognition Act. Who is anyone? I just don't get, like, in order to be trans, you have to have a certificate. You have to have approval. That wouldn't go on here. Where I live, you just, you live your life as you want to.
Does somebody want to read what B said in the side chat there? I think it's rather...
Which bit? Go on, Perps.
Well... Okay, she's saying, at 46 years old, the doctors were hesitant to let me get in. And then more, I need somebody else to read.
Endometrial ablation surgery, because I was still able to get pregnant. They wanted to make sure I didn't want more kids.
It goes on in her next message.
nor would become pregnant. The baby wouldn't survive and would have been an abortion if it were to happen. When I told them I'm a long-term lesbian, they agreed to do it, which is just crazy because lesbians have kids too. But
yeah, her being a lesbian shouldn't have had anything to do with it.
No, it has no basis on that.
It's like that suddenly makes them flip.
Yeah, well, it does often because doctors are just like
they
all other
don't want,
humans and people have prejudices.
They want every woman to have children, but they don't want a lesbian to raise children. Yeah. That's what it was, I'm sure. Yeah.
None of that.
Quite possibly.
All of that religious pressure, none of it makes sense. It's people controlling you because of a book that someone, some goat herders wrote 3,000 years ago. It just, I don't get it anymore. I'm asking
what's moral and what's immoral.
Yeah, I'm asking dumb questions on purpose, but it just the whole.
But
thing,
it is often the way that those who fight against body autonomy are often the religious, and their concepts are. I mean, especially in aspects of the right to choose when it comes to death.
So how do you take the power back, though? But how do you take your power back? That's
little by little. I mean, changing hearts and minds, getting people elected that agree that people should have bodily autonomy. I mean, not everybody agrees with me on this, but I take the stance that you have a right to do with your own body whatever you want, to like the extreme, in that I am for legalizing, taxing, and regulating all drugs. Have treatment programs for people with addictions. Stop the war on drugs that disproportionately affects minorities and people of color. But if you want to put a substance in your body as an adult, knowing the risks, you should be able to do that because it's your fucking body. I believe that you should be able to transition if you want to transition. I think in the case of children, we've seen no harm from puberty blockers. So rather than forcing them to go through with
40 plus years they've been used for and no harm.
Wow. Rather than forcing them to go through their, whatever, change they would naturally, giving them a window to become an adult and be able to understand the consequences and affirm that, yes, they are trans and they would like to do the opposite transition, puberty. The opposite puberty. Go for it. Puberty blockers for kids because they're too young to make that decision because it is, a full-on decision. But puberty blockers are reversible, so there's no reason not to use them. You want an abortion?
It's actually cisnormative to and I hate using that word, but it is true. It's cisnormative to say that we shouldn't do this because they should be allowed to find out what it is to be. And other people don't get to choose. Well, yeah, you do. I mean, you kind of do. In the sense that if you're somebody who's not actually going to put a complaint in about your transition, so if you're not feeling uncomfortable about your puberty, if you're not feeling uncomfortable about the puberty, you're unlikely to actually want to do anything about it. But you're still choosing to go through it, in a sense.
Yeah,
so well, you might bitch and moan about it.
Yeah, you might bitch and moan about it,
but I am solidly cis. I was fine with becoming a woman, yay me. But not everybody is. So, I mean, people should be able to make the choice themselves. And with something like puberty blockers that are reversible, there's no harm, no foul in giving them that little bit of extra time for their brains to develop more and for them to affirm what is right for them.
Their whole argument, anytime trans kids come up, their whole argument is that they're too young to make that decision. They're too young to really understand what that means. Okay, so why not just put it off until they're old enough to be able to make the decision?
Yeah, that's an argument for all kids to be on puberty blockers, not to
deny
them
that's how I always
kids.
turn it when people make that argument. I go, well, let's give all kids puberty blockers. We won't let any kids start puberty until they hit 13 or 14 and can decide for themselves. And they go, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, you're forcing them to make a decision, and if you don't...
Also, for the people that were early bloomers, I was an extremely early bloomer, in elementary school. I had to wear deodorant. I had zits. It's awkward. It was awkward. It was awful.
By 12, I was a B cup, so I feel you. Okay? I was already menstruating. I was a B cup. I feel you.
Yeah. No, I
took a little longer than you, Kitty. I wasn't a B until I was 16. So.
Yeah, by 16 I was a D.
Yeah, that happened much later for me.
By 21, I was a 34 triple D, so F, which is what I am now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love a breast reduction, but it's pricey.
They're really pricey.
And they won't deem it medically necessary.
They will
Even
if
though
your
I've got
back's bad
permanent
enough.
knots in my freaking shoulders here that are like rock solid. It takes hours to even make a dent in them, and they never go away. Like, I have neck and back problems. Like, I'm freaking miserable. And the traders' whores will sometimes slap me in the mouth if I'm not wearing any clothes. I mean, that's not fun.
I've never done that.
No. Okay, so I got out of the shower and I was wrapped in a towel and I went and laid down in bed. I'm like, fuck clothes. I don't need clothes. And then I went to twist to pop my lower back and just popped me right in the mouth. And I'm like, you bitch.
I have to say that.
I mean, being well endowed, you will often feel jealous of women with smaller breasts.
Don't be.
Because,
You want to be a C cup, D cup max.
yeah,
That's
it. But I mean, often those of us who are large actually get jealous of. I mean, when you lie down and you have to spread your arms wider because your tits are full on either side of your body, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, nobody really wants big boobs. Like, unless, you know.
Apart from some of the guys you might date who think it's awesome, it's like.
Or chicks going for world records where they want to be like a triple Z with like fucking
that gets weird after a while.
I don't like fake boobs. I've never liked fake boobs.
Yeah, but when it gets to like, you know, I call them Vegas size when it's like
they've got their own gravity.
Anime tits.
But that's somebody's choice to do that to themselves. You know, I'm no one to judge.
They should have the right to do it if they want to.
Absolutely.
To bodily autonomy. See?
When their breasts get that big, you keep expecting those Jewish death rays to come out the nipples.
Jewish nipple lasers. So Kitty, I was meaning to ask you, and this is sort of like for everybody, I guess. So you're very, very pro bodily autonomy, and I love that. We're very much on the same page on that. How do you feel about assisted suicide?
I'm absolutely for it.
Yep.
I think that you should have to go through counseling before, you know, they pull the trigger, because you need to, like, if you just had a bad breakup, you might decide that, hey, I want to do this. There should be a process to weed out, you know, but honestly, even if you still wanted to do it after a breakup, like if you've gone through a little bit of counseling to make sure that, you know, you are cognizant enough to make that decision and understand the consequences of it, Godspeed, bon voyage. You know, I don't
particularly want suicide booths like in
Futurama.
Yeah. But I mostly agree with you there, Kitty. I do agree that there's certainly a level of counseling, and that counseling should be free.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna be a little hardcore. I feel like we should do it, no questions asked.
Well, no, I'm saying you can still do it, but you have to go through counseling, even if it is just a breakup. Hopefully, that counseling will dissuade somebody where it's not a serious thing. Like,
you might also want to commit suicide just because you're depressed, and they could solve that depression with a few drugs, and then you're fine, and you don't want to kill yourself anymore. So it is worth encouraging somebody to go through to have a bit of therapy. I'm all for therapy for anybody who I'm not against therapy. I'm against gatekeeping. Mm-hmm. Gatekeeping can just fuck the hell off.
That's my thing. I'm super
I'm not against compulsory therapy. Therapy shouldn't be the be all and end all. If you have all this therapy and the therapist at the end thinks, I don't think you should be allowed to do that, it's still your fucking choice. So fuck off with that therapy.
Yes.
But I'm not against compulsory therapy in the sense that you should have the therapy, even for trans people. And I know a lot of trans people are going to be pissy with me at this. If you're going to transition, you are likely going to face other issues that you may not be capable of coping with on your own. Go have fucking therapy, because it's good. It is good. Find a good therapist who's understanding, and go and have the therapy too. I'm all for you as an adult making your own choice on transitioning, and that therapist should not be able to stop you. But go and have the therapy anyway.
Now, honestly, it took time for me to come to my, if you want to kill yourself, you should be allowed to kind of thing. When I was younger, I didn't have that position. And what changed it for me And, I was still relatively young when the position changed. Okay, so back up. When I was about 17, my dad, who's a Vietnam veteran, he had 2 botched back surgeries. He deals with chronic pain. Like, he had been in a motorcycle accident. He's just fucked up, all kinds of fucked up. He pulled me aside when I was 17 and said, look, I don't know how much more I can do this. I want out, you're going to have to step up and take care of your mom and your sisters. And I walked away from that conversation thinking he was the most selfish prick in the world. Like, I'll admit it. And then fast forward, not even 5 years, and I had the surgery that triggered my CRPS. And I had been dealing with chronic pain now for a couple of years. And it gave me a realization that I was the selfish one, because I didn't want to mourn the death of my father. So I wanted him to continue suffering. And like, it was a real like eye-opening moment. And I was in my early 20s when this happened. And I'm just like, losing someone is hard. It's sad and it hurts. But the thought of somebody, continuing to exist, in that state, like, it is exhausting being in chronic pain. It wears you down. It tires you out. It saps your energy. And I understand somebody not wanting to deal with that anymore. Now, my dad is actually still alive, because he toughed it out for a little while longer, and then his first grandchild was born, and then his second, and that kind of gave him a little bit more to kind of keep on chugging. But the VA's been fucking with him and trying to take away medications that were helping him function. So I don't know how that's going to go. But if he has that conversation with me again, if I'm ready to be done, I'm out. I'll be like, if that's what you decide, Dad, I support you,
In the past 3 years, I watched my grandmother. She lived to be 99, and she died 2 months before her 100th birthday. And after I want to say 98, she got dementia, and she suffered for the rest of her life. And that was 2 years ago. And last year, my dad died, and for the last year of his life, he had emphysema, and I watched him swimming in his own lungs. And he was this total Vietnam tough guy. He would always say, "Oh, I'm getting better. I'm getting better." But like, it was awful. It was awful, So I believe that if somebody, I'm more on the pain side because I come from an older family. I've watched people suffer at the end of their life. So I feel at the end of someone's life, if they want to make that choice, I'm no one to stop somebody. I'm a born asthmatic. I'm not going to live as I smoked for 20 years. I quit smoking 2 years ago. I'm not going to live forever. Like, I know one day everything that I've done in my body is going to catch up to me, So people in chronic pain, I have a different opinion because I've been, sick my whole life. So it's one of those things.
Okay, we're focusing on the chronic pain, which, I agree with is a major deal. But this is something that Sloth Girl and I have discussed, that, what if I wind up just a machine keeping me alive and so forth?
Yeah.
And for me, the point would be that if I'm not able to communicate anymore, then there's really no point in me continuing.
Oh, I agree.
So
if you're going to live the rest of your life in a virtual coma, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's that, Purple?
Well, how do you handle that when the patient can't actually talk for themselves?
A living will.
You have a plan in place with loved ones.
Absolutely, you have to.
A living will.
Yeah.
And in fact, with my chronic pain, when I was younger, I actually had a DNR. I was in my 20s, and I had a DNR. I was like, do not resuscitate. Like, if I'm out, let me go. Like, I wasn't at the point where I'm like, I'm going to end it. But sure as shit, don't bring me back to this hellscape. I mean, that's no longer in place because I have a son that needs me, and that gives me the strength that I need to keep things in perspective. But the sad thing is if you try to kill yourself and fuck up, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. Having something in place for a humane death is more humane. It's more merciful. And like, you can read the horror stories of people that try and fail. And I don't know, like, I just think that outlawing something doesn't work. I mean, people still commit suicide even though it's technically illegal. Prohibition never has worked. And it's your body, your choice. That extends beyond reproductive rights, but to transitioning rights, to the right to die, to the right to imbibe substances that might fucking kill you. Again, your body, you should have full, that's the libertarian side of me. I'm very to the left. I'm more left than Bernie.
So what about the point where your concept of bodily... What about to the point where somebody's concept of bodily autonomy works to the point that they're actually doing self-harm? Self-harm in a destructive manner and maybe aren't even aware that they're doing it.
I mean,
an example of that is what I brought up earlier with anorexia.
I think mental health in general is an unaddressed issue. I think everybody should talk to somebody. Everybody.
Compulsory therapy for everybody.
At least in America. I think after the past 4 years, we all need therapy.
I think it would have been interesting if you could have got Slim the Living Cyborg on for this one. Because he's already done things to his body that most people would think are pretty crazy.
Well, that's true.
And are only legal in certain states, like body modifications. And I'm going on, when I lived in Arizona, 20-something years ago. But Arizona was one of the only states where you could modify your body. I don't know about that now. I'm sure there's different laws, but...
I'm sure you could in California, can't you?
Back then you couldn't, but the laws have changed.
Yeah.
It's not something that I've looked up. I'm not looking into getting horns or,
But hey, if you wanted them, you, boo.
Exactly. I'm not judging,
I think we should answer Jenny, because she said no, depression cannot always be resolved by a couple of drugs. Suicidal depression is just as valid as a medical death suicide. 100% agree with you, Jenny. I think our point before was that the idea of saying people should, before they do this, should have some therapy, was the fact that for some people who are suicidal, therapy and drugs may help. If it doesn't help, then that's fine. They should still have every right to end their life. But people should be given options. And whilst it's your right to end your life, I think that options should be offered to people to help people. I mean, in a sense, when I was talking about anorexia almost comes down to a right to end your life, because if you really want to be that thin and you're going to kill yourself doing it, do we really have a right to stop somebody who doesn't want treatment, who doesn't want to get better? And I think there is a question about that.
I'm going to be controversial and say no.
I'm going to agree with you. I don't think we do have the right.
Unfortunately, someone has the right to go in the corner and just sit there and wait until they pass.
They do.
That's my.
I mean, I would say at least get them in for, just like you would for someone who was going the physician-assisted suicide route. Get them in for see if the underlying issues with their EDs can be addressed and if they can get better. But if they pull a Eugenia Cooney, go through rehab, so to speak, come back out, I'm fine, as she gets thinner and thinner. You know what? You want to kill yourself? Go for it. It's not my place to stop you.
Because at that point, they are aware that they're going to kill themselves, even if they can't see their body image the right way. And yes, it's sad and it's dreadful, but it's their life and it's their body. And just because we're horrified and disturbed by it doesn't mean we have the right to say to them, no, we're going to put you in hospital and force feed you. Because I think at that point we've unless the person asks to be force fed to help them survive because they don't want to die from their anorexia, I think we are stepping over that line of body autonomy if you're force feeding someone.
Yeah, I think we need to have them, have some therapy. But you need non-directive counselors who will just tell them that these are your options without trying to steer them to anything. Absolutely. And they should have to talk to a counselor, at least a couple of sessions, several days apart, just to make sure it's not their mood on one particular day.
Yeah, that's fair.
I agree with you. Because there are people who have, I can't say committed suicide, but have attempted, and they're glad that they lived,
Someone in my family did the whole poo-poo, mental health poo-poo therapy, and then they put a bullet in their head. And who knows if they still would have done that if they had gone through therapy. And one thing I do want to mention on Eugenie Cooney, like, yeah, everybody can see that she's self-destructing, but I think there's more to the story. Like, she is still living with her parents, and from some of the things that I've seen, it seems like she's actually in an abusive situation. There was one Twitch stream where she called on the phone to her mother. Now, the house that she paid for with her money, she called and asked permission to come down and get her Switch. I'm sorry, if I bought the house, I ain't asking my parents for permission for shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if I'm in my mid-20s.
They should have to ask fucking permission.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'd come kicking through the living room.
Definitely, possibly some abuse, going on there. At least it seems that way. And like when she was on the call, like you could see her like rubbing her arm. And as somebody that had that as a particular tell, when I was anxious in an abusive situation, honestly, I do think it's my opinion that she is in an abusive situation, and that if she could be removed from that and removed from social media and go through an actual full, treatment program, that I think she might have a chance at getting better. But if all of that is done and she doesn't get better, then it's on her to make the choice.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
But that comes back to what we were saying before about offering therapy, trying to encourage people to take the therapy and not just take the easy out. I'm not even going to call suicide an easy out. I don't think it always is an easy out. Sometimes it is a really hard decision for people to make. But to take that out of assisted suicide, or just suicide in general, it's one of those fine lines you have to tread.
Sometimes, you know what? We all don't have the same experience, and people have unbearable lives.
Yeah,
I've seen people that were. I actually know someone that I think actually is a really strong person. They were tortured as a child. They were absolutely tortured by their parents, and they grew up. They went to college. They made something of themselves. So, I don't know. I think people have the right to do with their body what they choose to, because I can't speak on someone else's situation, and life isn't always, smiles and handshakes.
I mean, but there's multiple ways to go about it too. Like my own grandfather, he was on a bunch of medications, and they're like, look, you probably only have a year or two left. These medications, they were giving him a lot of side effects. He was miserable all the time. So it came to the conversation of quality or quantity. You could stop the medications and you might have 3 to 6 months, or continue the medications and stay alive longer, but be miserable the entire time. He opted for the former. He stopped the medications. He said he felt 15 years younger. He got back to doing walks, spending time with the family, and he made the most of the last moments he had. And so it's not just a pulling the trigger type thing. Like there's also other ways to go about it. And I think that choice should be left up to the individual.
I agree.
Regardless.
Right. Yeah. And that's more the thing I see, the chronic pain, of course, is the one we always hear about. But I mean, just in any situation, if the person is facing that, yeah, they can probably live a couple more years, but they can't do any of the things they enjoy doing.
So I
can see at that point of thinking, is this worth going on?
And that's another thing. Like I witnessed my dad, who was an electrical engineer, like he would get bored and like, he's like, I'm going to make a panel at like 80, at 70 something years old. He's like, he was still driving a tractor. We'd go to work every day. We work at a place that has 65 acres. So it's fun, and when he couldn't do that anymore, he lost who he was. Because that's, and his older age, that's what he did. That's who he was. And it was unbearable to see such a strong person just slowly fade away.
At that point, you're existing, not living. And what's the point of existing if you're miserable?
And he used to always tell me, like, the second I go home and just sit on the couch, I'm going to pass. And he did, it's just so I know we've gone straight to the fluffy subject of assisted suicide. But I feel
my
like
bad.
No, it's
That's
okay. This is excellent.
No, it's
excellent
good.
subject.
It's good to talk about. Like I I don't know how many other people on the panel like are anywhere near me on, drug policy, but that's another aspect of bodily autonomy that I think we could talk about.
I am as well, because it also would stop a lot of the stigma. It would stop a lot of overdosing. It would stop people,
a lot of crime.
And you could educate someone. You could tell them, like, hey, take half an eighth of shrooms instead of eating 2/8, or
The other side of this,
there are
if
certain
you've got,
things you can tell people.
as it's been shown in marijuana, where you can legally go and buy it in stores, the quality of the product improves to the point that it's safe. So half the thing that kills people when they take illicit drugs is the fact that they're cooked up in somebody's fucking kitchen and have baking soda in them.
Yeah, you could literally have, labs manufacturing these things and know that there are safety controls in place.
And the government could tax the hell out of them like they do cigarettes. They could have use that money for advertising campaigns against taking drugs, but don't actually make them illegal.
And the money
here in Oregon, they decriminalized everything.
I was just about to say.
The latest election, they decriminalized everything, and they're like working towards, like rehab programs and stuff like that, and addiction counseling and stuff like that. And I think they're doing studies on ketamine.
Mm-hmm.
I think. How much higher can my voice go? Let's see.
Griffin.
I actually do that all the time.
Well, and that's the approach I think has been needed all along, is we need to stop treating drug addiction as a crime and treat it as a medical condition.
Because that's exactly what it is. And, I mean, here's the thing. We know demonstrably that prohibition does not work. Just look to the prohibition of alcohol. What happened? People still drank, and it gave power to the mafia. They had unprecedented power. It created organized crime. Now it's the cartels and the gangs that are in control of the drug supply. Why would I risk, like, if I wanted to go get heroin and it was illegal and I knew that I was going to get grade A heroin, from the pharmacy or whatever, why would I risk going to the dude down the street that it could be fucking laced with fentanyl where it's going to kill me, where I know exactly what's in that heroin, I know exactly what dosage will work to get me the high that I want to achieve, and I'm not going to fucking die,
So here in California, that's actually what happened with at least marijuana. It really put a dent in the cartel's sales, because all of a sudden pot's legal, so they really don't need dealers anymore.
Yeah, sure, I might be paying more, but I'm paying for a higher quality product that I know is safe. So, and the tax money, the tax revenue from it is getting reinvested into the community. Hell, you could use the tax revenue that you make from it and the money that you save by stopping the war on drugs. And those two things combined would be enough to not only fund healthcare for people with, addiction issues, but also funnel more money into schools. Because right now, the way our schools are funded, it is only from property taxes and maybe a little bit from lottery. Maybe like that's
Colorado has been dumping money into schools and highways, because a year after they legalized marijuana, their biggest problem was what to do with the money, because the revenue turned out 8 times what anyone had projected.
They really did. They were asking people to take the money, basically.
That would literally have wide-reaching implications for everybody, because with schools that are equally funded and better funded, then you would allow people the education to help lift them out of poverty. The biggest problem and the terrible cycle that a lot of people of color end up in is they're in shitty areas with shitty underfunded schools, and they're kind of doomed from the start. Like, sure, you're going to have some success stories.
It's ridiculous.
And
you'll have some success, but most of them are not going to succeed, and it's not really their fault. Like, they literally are meant to run a 100-meter race starting a mile behind with a fucking hole in their foot. Like, you can't pull yourself up by bootstraps. If you got no boots, you got no straps, and you got a goddamn hole in your foot because they freaking shot you in it.
I never noticed that until I moved away from the area from that I'm from. And when I moved to LA, I lived in Arizona, and I saw that, not everybody comes from good areas with great schools. It's a big difference. I learned it. I speak Spanish. It helped me get other jobs. The school I went to helped reinforce my Spanish. They were like, "Oh, you speak Spanish? You're going to need it one day." Well, I went out in the real world, and I really did. And it's because of the school I went to. They helped me out, even though I'm half Mexican, so I should be speaking Spanish anyways. But I got basically, when my high school education was equivalent to a college, like a junior college education in LA. And I didn't realize it until I moved to LA, and I was like, people were learning in college. Yeah. Black Tino is kind of offensive. I'm kidding. So I go Blaxican.
But no, and here's the thing, like that would have wide-reaching impacts because not only would it help lift people up out of poverty, but it would lead to a more educated and informed electorate. So we would not be electing Ted Cruz's and Josh Hawley's and fucking Lindsey Graham.
And that is largely what the Republicans are afraid of. That if people are more educated on the issues, it's going to be harder for them to win elections.
Yeah, because
and that's why they do so much voter suppression too.
Which I still do not understand why people vote against their own interests.
Because the Republicans get them whipped up over things like abortion and gay marriage because they can play on their emotions and they don't need to show anything provable.
And fear. Like the migrant caravan was coming up until election day, and then all of a sudden it was like it never fucking existed.
Oh, they're still there.
Calves the size of cantaloupes and all that.
They showed up again when Biden was sworn in.
They won't let us. They won't even let us bring water down there. Don't even get me started on that. On that whole thing, they won't. If you look like you're going to help people or hand anything across the Border Patrol will stop you. They can't arrest you, but they'll confiscate your stuff. I've tried twice.
There are places where they will arrest you for trying to feed the homeless.
Oh yeah, it's totally illegal.
That's basically what they're doing on the border. Sorry, that's basically what they're doing on the border. It's bad.
And like I think that bodily autonomy does extend to other rights. You have a right to your body, but like I honestly think that under that is a right to healthcare, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness kind of thing, because like that's allowing you to make the choices with your body that you want to do. Like healthcare, I believe, is a fundamental right, especially in a first world country. There is no excuse not to have everybody covered.
Healthcare.
And if we had universal healthcare, we could create an infrastructure to have jobs to help people implement that. Because we don't. It's pay to play in America. You have to have money. You have to have money to have insurance.
Wasn't it who does? You don't like it when people call it free healthcare because it's not free.
Not even here, and we have
no, but it shouldn't be called free healthcare anyway. Because even like in Australia, we pay for our healthcare with our tax. So everyone in Australia pays a tax, and that's contribution to the to the health.
Even if I was healthy, like even if I didn't have my disability, like I wouldn't care that my tax dollars were going to help pay for somebody else's cancer treatment.
Yeah, but rich people do.
Because I actually I actually care about my fellow man. And I think that a government has a responsibility to take care of its citizens. And I honestly believe there should be a baseline below which you cannot fall. And that is healthcare, housing, and food. Like
education.
Education too.
At least education, primary and secondary education. College, maybe not so much. Although I think that should be government supported and not in the way that your government does it, because your student loans are ridiculous.
What were you going to say, Purple? What were you going to say?
The other issue with why we keep electing people who are just downright unqualified for their positions is because people will always vote for whoever promises not to raise their taxes. Because most Americans don't understand how taxes work. They don't understand what the money is used for. So they don't realize that if we keep cutting taxes, you can't have decent schools. And when it gets right down to it, like the community I lived in, Michigan, could no longer afford to support a fire department.
Oof.
So they had disbanded the fire department. It was completely volunteer firefighters.
Like I said, voting against your own interests, I just refuse to understand that.
hell, we're already at the point where, our infrastructure gets a grade of D. Like, our infrastructure is falling apart. Yeah. And yet they're not doing anything about it. I think Biden said that that's part of the thing that he wants to get through is something on infrastructure. I'll believe it when I see it because other presidents have said the same.
Yeah. But, Obama tried, but it was more roads and less about people,
Well, I mean, roads matter too. Like, our bridges are crumbling. Like, there are bridges that, have not been, maintained to the extent that they are literally a public safety hazard. And the roads, like, I mean, just there's potholes and, all kinds of issues. And sure, you think, oh, a pothole's not that bad. But when there's so many of them and when you see that, like, the bridges aren't really safe anymore, where they're like, I'm surprised it's still standing when you talk to an actual engineer and they're like, yeah, that's fucking terrifying. People will fucking die. And it's like they don't care. And I know it's because they don't. Like, most politicians don't actually give a fuck, regardless of, your color. It literally comes down to how much money you have. If you are not wealthy, they give zero fucks about you. And most of us are not wealthy.
And we're distracted too, though. So, as long as you have a Wi-Fi connection and your phone is shiny, most people could care less about what's going on,
It's not even just that. They go with the partisan. It's have the Republicans pissed at the Democrats, have the Democrats pissed at the Republicans, and they won't notice that we're fucking shitting on all of them.
Yeah, everybody's getting ripped off.
As long as they can find ways to divide people up into different groups. Because if everybody voted on their economic level, the millionaires would be screwed.
Yeah.
Because we have more power than them by our vote. The problem is people short attention spans. I mean, perfect example, look at Michael Bloomberg. He hopped into the race, spent millions on advertising, and he climbed up in the polls, even though he's not even really well liked. And he wasn't really super well known, outside of, starting Bloomberg, But even then, I mean, it basically, you have to be wealthy to run for president. And the fact that we have a two-party system, like that duopoly that they have, it literally hurts everybody. And I think the only way we're going to get rid of that is if we switch to a ranked choice voting, where it's like, all right, my first choice is Biden or, Bernie, and my second choice is Biden. My third choice is whoever.
Yes, I love you.
And by doing that, you're not throwing your vote away by voting third party. And I would, if they switch to ranked choice, I would always vote for a third party just to try to get their numbers up so that they end up on a national stage. Because that is the way they keep third parties out of the mainstream, is by not allowing them on the debate stages, by not allowing them that exposure. I also think that all elections should be publicly financed by tax money, so you don't have like the last one where like $1 billion was spent. No, fuck you. Having more money shouldn't give you a better chance at getting elected.
Not at all.
It should be based on the issues.
Imagine all that money spent and wasted.
Absolutely.
It could have been gone anywhere else.
It could have gone to so many things.
Right.
How many fucking homeless kids could that have fed? Like,
Absolutely.
seriously.
Absolutely. How you doing, Matt?
All right. I've got a few minutes to spare before I need to go, but hopefully I can say something useful in that time.
Go for it.
Although my lasers are starting to come together, I haven't set up the right laser yet, but I'm starting to align.
No, you missed it. We were talking about Jewish nipple lasers earlier.
I came in right when that was going on. The first thing I heard was
Yay!
big boobs. That's although somewhat back to the topic. A few people here might have heard the story. I burnt my hand in a lab accident quite badly. I spilt what was essentially a sulfur mustard. If you think about sulfur gas, the mustard gases from World War I, this was the solid version of that, and it soaked into my skin. Took more than 4 days to stop burning.
Ooh.
Like, my hand was covered in blisters several centimeters across each. They burst them in the hospital, cleaned it up as best they could, but the remaining skin just looked like a glove with holes in it. Yet, I needed skin graft and everything. It was several trips to the hospital. I was in bandages for months. Yet, it cost me pretty much nothing. Between and mainly it came out of Medicare, which is Australia's kind of way of covering health funds so that everything is affordable, even if you have to pay. So we have for example, a lot of medications which would normally be super expensive, but what they do is they say everybody's going to pay. Well, the medication has to be actually listed on it, a pharmaceutical benefits scheme or PBS. And if it's on there, you just pay a set amount of dollars for your pills, no matter how much they actually cost.
Yeah.
And so if you've got very expensive, say, cancer treatments that you need to buy, the average person can afford it without losing everything.
Yeah, and the rates you pay dependent on your economic level. So that if you're unemployed or if you're a low-income earner, you get a healthcare card, and that healthcare card entitles you to a lower rate of expense for medication.
I remember when my mom was going through chemo for her colon cancer. At one point, she had switched from. She'd actually had multiple chemos. One was HIPEC, and that was a surgical chemo. But then she had, the chemo port, but she started spiking really high fevers, so they decided to switch her to another one. And when we went to go to the pharmacy to pick it up, they're like, all right, that'll be $30,000. So you'd be paying cash, check, or charge. And it's like, excuse me? My mom's like, guess I'll die then, But fortunately, the doctor, like one of the nurses at the doctor's office, actually, her whole job was to find like grants and other things to help people that just did not. My mom's on disability. Like, she doesn't have any money. So they were able to get it so that she didn't have to pay. But I mean, if somebody didn't have a doctor who had a nurse that like would do something like that, look for all of these grants, if they weren't advocating for themselves, they would die. It's just like, well, I guess I'm dead.
Absolutely.
Nice knowing you.
And it shouldn't be like that. I mean, that is an invasion of bodily autonomy. And it's profiteering as well to a certain extent. But I mean, I understand the drug companies have to make back the money that they put into producing the drugs, but I can't see the justification for charging
No.
$30 grand for
they
a
get
drug.
taxpayer dollars. No, they get taxpayer dollars in grants for research.
Yeah.
In fact, the fucking COVID vaccine was almost completely funded by taxpayer money because they were building on research that had been done by the Institute of Health after the SARS outbreak. They started working on a coronavirus vaccine in case of the next SARS, or if SARS came back, which was where they started with the whole spike protein and RNA. Like, all of that was done at the National Institute of Health. It was taxpayer money that paid for that fucking vaccine, and yet they still want to charge out the ass for it. Fuck you.
And
that's most drugs. Most drugs get taxpayer money in their R&D.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Regardless of
that's why I like
argument,
Australia's system, because the companies still have an incentive to make these new drugs. But if you can get it listed, then it's affordable for people. You don't have to pay, out your rear end just to be able to afford them.
Thing about that listing... Sorry, Matt. Go.
I had a couple of questions about America's healthcare system. I imagine people here would be better suited to answer that, because I was hearing one of the problems that I've heard is that for the same treatment in America, it costs about 3 times what it does here in Australia, regardless of funding from various sources.
It can be even higher than that.
Just like,
and part of that due to the kind of litigation, or is it far more
our company, our country is ran by
companies.
Yeah, our country is ran by lawyers.
Yeah,
and they're ran by pharmaceutical companies. Like, my son has ASD. His health insurance is $3,000 every 90 days.
Well, and what I was trying to say,
the average person would not be able to afford that. On top of, I'm a born asthmatic. I have to pay for my own health insurance, and up until Trump came around, I wasn't able to. No one was able to drop me. And magically, when Trump became president, I got dropped off my insurance because I'm a liability because I'm an asthmatic. So I had to find another company and beg them to take my case, basically, and I'm paying for that now.
That wouldn't be allowed here. You'd have a waiting period in Australia because of a pre-existing condition. But so usually it's only about 3 to 6 months before you're allowed to make a claim.
I'm kind of mad at Kaiser because I was with them my whole life and they dropped me. They would basically like as a born asthmatic they would let me die. They
here's the thing.
they would basically
That's fucked up.
It's because
Now.
It's because the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies, they have lobbyists and they get the politicians to side with them. The reason our healthcare costs are so high is because of the rapacious for-profit insurance companies.
Yep.
Those middlemen are actually the thing jacking up the prices. Like, cost over $1,000 for an ambulance ride. I had a friend in Canada that got pissed at a $50 bill for an ambulance ride.
Even if you don't have insurance in Australia, an ambulance ride is $1,000.
Any argument that anybody makes for how much the drugs cost in the U.S. has to explain why the same drug, even produced in the same factory, costs 8 to 12 times as much in the U.S. as it does when they ship that drug to Canada to sell it.
And Mexico, because I lived in Sinaloa, and the same drugs that we have here are an inhaler. My inhaler is $95 without insurance. It was $4 in Mexico.
See, but that's where your lobbying works the wrong way around, because like in America, you're saying about the insurance company and the drug company lobbyists lobby the government so that they can charge these exorbitant prices and they can have legislation that helps them make profits. In Australia, the Australian government lobbies to make sure that the drugs that come in Australia come in at a reasonable price, and that's even before they subsidise them.
Yeah, and in the US, the federal government has done exactly the opposite, because they have signed agreements that guarantee that Medicaid and Medicare cannot negotiate with the drug companies for the prices.
Yep.
That's what I was trying to get in. Yeah. And because of that, the prices are so much higher and they get away with it. Like you had like the Pharma Bro guy, Martin Shkreli, he increased the price of a medication like 7,000%.
He was such a scumbag. He was
a scumbag.
But other people do it, but they don't do it like as blatantly, where it's, 100-year-old drug that, has generics available and they do that. But part of the issue is there's also multiple different pricings that you will get depending. So say treatment A, Medicare will pay $500 for it. Well, that same treatment, if you don't have insurance, they're going to charge you $3,000 for it. And if you have insurance, the insurance will probably end up paying $1,000 for it. Roughly. This is just rough math, but basically if you have insurance, the insurance paying the claim, it is, a bit more than what the price limit for Medicare and Medicaid is, but it is a fraction of what they charge you if you don't have insurance. One of the reasons that people are, going into so much medical debt is literally because of that, where they will charge you an exorbitant rate, like 10, 20 times what they charge an insurance company or what Medicare allows them to charge if you have no insurance.
And they count on people not challenging it too. Yep. They count on people not saying, I need to get an itemized bill, or, they count on people not negotiating with it. They count on people not pushing back on, because it costs them like fucking maybe $450, $500, if even that. Yep.
And when people do get an itemized bill, they pad it out by putting in things like $80 for each aspirin.
Yeah. Or $70 for a cough suppressant aid because they gave you a tissue.
$500 for a bed fee.
See, this blows my mind. I mean, my brother just spent nearly a month in hospital and $0 paid absolutely not a cent for it.
Do you know? I always think
you'd be bankrupt for life in the US.
Or have passed. or not survived anything that your brother.
Because people have to choose between like, am I gonna be able to afford to get this medical care, or should I just ignore the fact that my chest fucking hurts and I've got shooting pains going down my arms? Oh wait, I just had a heart attack and died because I couldn't afford to go to the fucking hospital when I needed to.
Medical costs are the number one cause of personal bankruptcy in the U.S.
Yep.
And they are over 80% of the campaigns on GoFundMe.
Yeah. And that's actually something that they suggest is if you can't, if your insurance denies this, or if you can't pay, go ahead and start a crowdfunding campaign to pay your medical bills. That's something the hospitals are suggesting.
I'm going to pull it back to COVID. How many extra deaths do you think there's been in the US from people who got COVID, couldn't afford to go to the hospital, and just died at home?
I'd say at least a quarter. At least a quarter.
The numbers in the... Sorry, I was watching a statistic towards the end of last year where someone had gone through and looked at deaths in the United States and had calculated based on the previous year, then how many should we have seen this year, and then went through and did how many were unaccounted for extra deaths did the US have last year, and it was about the same number that had already died of COVID that were known of. So there was this... towards the end of last year, more than 200,000 extra deaths. So it looks like that a lot of people were dying of COVID and it was not even detected.
Well, the problem is we had incompetent leadership that wouldn't even admit that there was something going on.
Yeah, honestly, even before the leadership, though, like we have 40,000 plus Americans that die every year because they don't have access to healthcare.
Yeah.
And that's just the ones we know about.
Even to take it back to COVID, like right now in LA, they're saying if you don't have COVID, don't go to the hospital. That's how bad it is. It's people I don't know. It's so back to body autonomy. Do people have a right to not wear a mask?
No.
No, because that's just about yourself.
Your collective responsibility is overruled by your personal
body autonomy
kind of freedoms. Because in that case, it's not just you that's getting harmed. A lot of the cases that were mentioned earlier, or the few that I managed to catch, were about you. It was about how it affected you, and it wasn't going to. Yes, there might be grief from, say, the assisted suicide thing, but you weren't going to bring physical harm on other people because of your action. And I think that's why when it comes to the masks, in that case, there is no doubt that you do not have a right to take actions that we know and can prove
endanger
will cause
other people's
people
lives
to die.
However, I'm going to play devil's advocate
Not to mention
here.
the long-term
Couldn't you use that same argument against abortion?
I would say no. And the reason why, the reason why
I had to do it. Somebody had to do it.
No. It's not even about sentience. It's about the fact that, and I'm a mother, but I'm still going to get hate for this. Until fetal viability, a fetus is a parasite. It cannot exist outside of the mother.
Yep.
And a parasite should not have rights that overweigh that of the host. The woman, up until fetal viability, should have a say over her own body. Once she reached fetal viability, then I can see an argument being made of, the child's rights, kicking in at that point, which is why I like how things are now with Roe v. Wade, where, first trimester abortions up to, and second up to, I forget, it's 26 weeks, 22 weeks.
26 weeks is about the level of like gestational viability for a fetus.
Yeah.
I think the youngest like preemie ever born, I think, was like either just over or just shy of 24 weeks.
Wow.
Right, so basically up to, say, we'll set that as the limit, up to 24 weeks. It's the woman's choice, no questions asked. After that, I'm fine with certain restrictions in place to, where you have the exemptions we already have. Life of the child, life of the mother, rape, incest, because getting prenatal care, getting care is not always an option for women. And I actually know someone who had to have a late-term abortion because the fetus had hydrocephaly. It was not going to survive anyway. She had picked out baby clothes, had a name, painted the baby room. She was fucking devastated. Yet when she was brave enough to share her story, she got dragged for being a baby murderer. It's like, nah, the baby was dead already. It was literally, there was no way to save the child. It just, no amount of medical intervention was going to do that. And I actually did a paper in college where I was talking about pregnancy essentially, where I discussed like twins, and that was a small part, but I also did like fetus in fetu and teratomas. Teratomas are basically tumor babies. Like, that's the best way to sum them up. And fetus in fetu is where one twin basically envelops another twin, similar to like chimerism. But with chimerism, like, it's done early in the process where they merge into one person, which is really cool. Like, there was actually a woman that she had a custody thing, or a child support thing, and they did a paternity test, found out that, she wasn't the mother, and she was pregnant again, and they actually did a DNA test on the baby as it came out of her, and it,
in utero it was actually.
It was in utero? DNA. Okay, so... Yeah, they're like, wow. It's sure she's not the mother, and it was because the DNA they were sampling was from one part of her chimerism, whereas the DNA that the child was getting from her was another part of her chimerism. And there have actually been babies that they are half black and half white, where it's almost like a split down the middle. I saw one child that I actually included in my paper that was half black and half white because of chimerism. But fetus and fetu.
My skin discolorations that I have. Caused by my chimerism.
That is so fascinating. Oh, I wish I knew you back in college. And then fetus and fetu is if that process happens a little further on in development, instead of it merging into like one homogeneous being, it envelops the other, and the twin that survives will essentially be born pregnant with their twin that they enveloped in utero. And I mean, it was really fascinating. I know I took it off on a little tangent there, but fun little.
I'm taking notes.
Chimerism is quite common. Chimerism, where it also develops as being intersex, is
Matt. Matt has to take off. Yeah, you have to take off, Matt.
Yes, I have to get going. I'm going to head off early.
No worries, Matt.
It was good.
Thank you for joining.
As always.
It was nice seeing you. Yes. If you have more questions about U.S. healthcare, feel free to hit me up in DMs. I will bitch and moan about it all day long.
We'll tell you how horrible it is.
Oh, and if anyone watches any of the ACA shows, the Atheist Community of Austin, I'm going to be on Truth Wanted for me tomorrow morning, or for Friday evening for anyone in US time.
Nice.
If I can shout that out.
Awesome.
But until then, I guess, I hope one day this won't be a conversation we need to keep having, but
absolutely.
I think until then, I'm lost as to what we can do, but we, I guess, have to do something.
Well, America's already done something. They've got a Democratic government now, not a Republican government, so they'll hopefully start moving things in the right direction, especially as Biden has the power to do things. But you're still going to have to put pressure on them, because they're not going to do anything if the pressure's not given.
Agreed. We have to use our voices. We have to advocate for change. We have to vote for politicians that agree with us that change needs to be made. And you need to advocate for yourself when it comes to healthcare, because if you don't, no one else will. And it could have fatal consequences.
Oh, especially in America, they will, when I say the system will let you die. So if you do not speak up, if you do not seek help, no one will reach out to help you. That's
we will see you again soon, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Bye, Matt.
I'll be around.
Okay.
Yes. Goodbye, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.
Yeah, and I'm a type 1 diabetic. So I've been a professional appointment goer since I was 12 years old, and I'm 34 now. So it's everything having to do with the medical system. My mom was okay, once I turned 18, she's you're going to deal with all of this yourself. I still had her health insurance and stuff, but she was just all you get to handle that now. And I'm just fuck. So Like, I have had to deal with, since Will, you were saying you used to have a Kaiser, that's who I've got now.
I've had them since
because
I was born there. I've had them since I was a kid, and they cut me off.
that's so infuriating.
The sad thing is, though, they're asking me to come back, and I'm not kidding you. It's because of Trump. He cut so much funding in California. It got ridiculous here, and now they're ask me to come back, and I'm like, go stuff yourself.
Yeah, it's like,
Good
no,
Good for you.
Yeah,
Trump made you a Democrat.
I mean, the thing is the Affordable Care Act, a lot of people demonized it without actually knowing what it did. Because if you actually say, do you think children should stay on their parents' insurance till they're 26? Yeah. Do you think that an insurance company should be able to deny you coverage because you have a pre-existing condition? No. Do you think that insurance should be affordable for people? Yes. Like, going issue by issue, like when you actually, even the people that are like, keep, fuck Obamacare, but when you called it the Affordable Care Act, they're like, yeah, no, I like that one.
Yeah. It's like you just phrase it differently and they're totally
Exactly.
in favor of it, as long as you're not using like the buzzwords.
It's like the people, keep your government hands off my Medicare.
Yeah.
I mean, Obama did say, call it whatever you want. I don't care. Just keep
like,
it.
This is what it is. Yeah.
That's the problem, and at least in America, is that propaganda works. So it goes back to people will vote against their own interests, not knowing that they've been duped by somebody who's just talking fast.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Ben Shapiro.
It's like a common enemy. It's like a common enemy that they demonize, anybody who is a minority, and they say, look, this person, if they're Latinx, they're just a Mexican who's gonna steal your job, and if they're black, they're just a gangster who's gonna come and shoot you and rob you and shit like that. They make it so that they instill. It's like y'all were saying. There's this fear that they instill in people, and they feed off of it.
Even when the politicians are projecting contradictory narratives, the people still buy it. Because they're saying that we don't want the Mexicans coming in because they're lazy and they're going to exploit the welfare system, but at the same time, they're going to steal your jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you don't want somebody here because they're too lazy and they're going to steal your job, what does that say about you as a worker?
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the thing, like that. I mean, there's a couple of things. Like, one, they found that conservatives actually tend to have an elevated fear response. Like, the parts of their brain that are triggered by fear are overly sensitive in conservatives. So the fear narrative works, and it's not something new. I mean, going back to, my stance on drugs, like there was a point in time when all drugs were legal in the United States, and they weren't made illegal because of, fear of, the drugs. Like, they actually were made illegal because of racism and xenophobia. Basically, they used to give cocaine to the black dock workers, but after some riots, because they were being treated essentially like slaves, they'd coke them up so that they would work more because it's a stimulant with, less sleep. And, they were right. So they had pamphlets going around saying cocaine crazed Negroes were going to come and assault the white women. And that was literally a thing.
And that's redlining too.
And in the 30s, they also demonized pot, and they said that the Mexicans were bringing it here, and they used that as an excuse to kick out Mexicans.
Yeah, and there was a point in time where you could get life imprisonment for any marijuana contraband in Texas. And for opium, that was targeted at the Asian immigrants. They came to build the railroads and everything, and we were great with them there. But then when they didn't just disappear after putting in their labor, it was, oh no, the white women are going to be lured into the opium dens, and those whatever. I don't even know.
It's fear of what's going to happen to the white woman, isn't it? Because
yes,
it's the same thing when they talk about fear of trans people. It's the white woman's going to be oppressed by.
Well, that's because on a level they still see women as property.
You know,
I would
also-
rather be in a bathroom with fucking 50 trans women than one Marjorie Taylor Greene. Just saying.
Oh.
Agreed.
You know, people also
Okay.
go by stereotypes. 2 weeks ago, I had to get my electrical panel stuccoed on outside of my house. So when I was on Purple Show, the whole time I'm like, I'm waiting for the stucco guy. I'm waiting for the stucco guy. The stucco guy shows up. We're talking. You know, he's like, "Oh, you're cool." He's like, "So where's Mister?" And he says my last name because he didn't think that I owned my house because of the neighborhood I live in. And it wasn't. He was completely polite about it, but he was inferring like, "Oh, you're cool, but where's your boss? Because you can't possibly own all this stuff." And I'm like, this is my house, bro. Gates open, go around the back. And he was kind of like, oh. And then the whole time they came back, and I was on Purple Stream again. The whole time I had my garage open, every time they'd walk by, they were kind of like looking in, like I was a Yeti. Like they'd finally found a Yeti, you know? Like, oh my gosh, a brown person who lives in the suburbs. They were shocked.
Well, I
They
mean,
were
fuck. My partner is mixed. His father was from Guyana, half Indo-Guyanese, half Afro-Guyanese, and his mother was from Germany. And whenever she would be walking her children, you know, pushing them in a stroller, they, you know, would basically make the assumption that she was the nanny, not the mother, because she was white and they were most definitely not white. I mean, it's like my son is part black, but he is incredibly white passing. But I would never get, you know, those kind of comments because you look at him and he looks Caucasian. Doesn't matter that he's more than just Caucasian. He's also Guyanese, you know, Afro and Indo-Guyanese.
Judgmental of us. I mean, anything that's out, and it's not just a white people thing, regardless of what people say about race. I mean, if you go to other countries that have less white people in them, you'll find racism towards white people. But in the Western world, most of the racism comes from white people because white people are the majority, and they're looking around and go, well, "We're better than this mob." And
well, it's also if you don't go somewhere and don't speak the language. Like if you go somewhere and you don't speak the language, you can get discriminated against real quick.
Oh, very quickly.
Even if you do, I mean, Japan is a prime example of that. Like even if you speak the language, you are going to be treated differently if you are not Japanese. And
Paris, France, I'm looking at you. Paris,
it isn't even until recently that, you know, half Japanese, you know, they were half Japanese, half whatever, started gaining a little bit more social acceptance. Like, I think there was a big deal when a hafu ended up winning like a Japanese beauty pageant or something like that. And it's like as the older generations die off, the younger generations, regardless of whether they call themselves progressive or not, are more progressive. They are more open-minded and they are less bigoted. And so I think eventually it's going to fade away.
That's always historically been the case, but it isn't. Because if you look at history, there are points in history where we've actually become more progressive and then gone way backwards.
Way back, yeah.
Look at America
I think our current situation now has shown how far back we could slide in 4 years.
Absolutely,
exactly.
Absolutely. We've gone. You know what? We've gone back like 20 years.
We've also gone way off topic, but I'm enjoying this topic.
No, I think it does all tie back to bodily autonomy, though, because you have a right to not be discriminated against based on immutable factors of your being.
That you have no fucking control over.
Exactly. It's like, if you can't change it in 5 minutes, then somebody shouldn't discriminate against you about it. Like, you could have like some goofy ass hairdo. Like, I could style my hairdo to look like a cock and balls. Okay, if somebody wanted to be pissy about that, fine. But I could change that in 5 minutes. You know, if it's something you can't change.
That's just the Bram Stoker.
You want to see that?
Dracula.
Now, on next week's stream, Kitty is going to style her hair.
My hair is pretty long. I could probably like
something about Mary.
You know, something about Mary, but like style it as like a beehive. Have 2 little space buns and then the beehive, and then maybe one string of it just kind of like dangling out the end.
The Princess Leia dick look.
Oh my god!
You're going to need a lot of got to be glued.
Yeah, it will take me 2 hours to wash all that shit out of my hair, and I will make sure I don't use Gorilla Glue.
No, don't use
Yeah,
Gorilla
don't use
Glue.
the Gorilla Glue.
Oh, that made me want to.
I feel so
Oh, that
bad
was
for that woman,
terrible.
though.
That
She
made me
was
want to
like,
cry when I saw that.
she was like just looking for help, and she got so dragged. And it's, to me, that's like the lady with the McDonald's coffee.
Oh,
Like,
that case pisses me
people
off so
just-
much.
People just latched onto this one thing, and they dragged that poor woman just like they dragged the woman
Here's
with
the
the Gorilla
thing.
Glue.
Well,
And I'm just like,
She had serious burns. She needed skin grafts.
Yeah.
That's how I've seen the photos of
Oh.
what
she
that
wasn't
woman
even
went
asking
through.
for like hardcore compensation. She just wanted
asked for her medical bills
paid.
covered,
Yeah.
and McDonald's was like,
Right.
"Fuck you." So I'm glad she got $1 million or whatever.
And a
the
lot
fuck
of
it
how
was.
that's portrayed in the media, again, has to do with corporations pushing the narrative.
Mhm.
Because, like, the thing with the McDonald's thing, yeah, they didn't bother to tell people when that was going on that same McDonald's had already been told twice to turn down the temperature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That
It
the
had
health
already- like, it
inspectors
had
had
already
told
hurt
them
people.
that this is a hazard. A customer could get injured by this.
Yeah.
And
They
that's the
didn't- they
thing.
didn't care.
Corporations are not people. I will not believe a corporation is a person until they execute one in Texas.
I've never understood that whole thing of giving corporations human-like rights. It's
Yeah.
never made any sense to me at all.
Well,
Ultimately,
I think
there
what
is
we
a
need-
person responsible for the shit that a corporation does.
Right.
So make the
I think
person
what we
responsible.
need is for the corporations to start being held responsible in that way.
Absolutely.
You don't just fine the corporation or take the corporation to court, that the top managers have to take some personal responsibility for the decisions that were made that got to that point.
Mhm.
And I think the punitive damages should be based on a percentage, not a flat fee. Because a multi-billion-dollar company paying out a $50 million fine, yeah, sucks for them, but they don't really care.
Yeah.
But if you say you're going to have to pay 10% of your earnings that year, then they're going to fucking sit up and take notice. And that's what
Or-
they care about is the money.
Or you
Yeah.
hold CEOs liable. Put someone
Yeah.
in prison and see what
Personally.
happens.
That's what
Put
I
someone
mean.
in prison.
Somebody in the management has to be held personally liable if the
Yeah.
corporation did something that's criminal or
Absolutely.
willfully negligent.
Mhm.
And and that's I feel like that even with like I obsessively have Apple technology. They spend more
I'm
money
so sorry.
they spend more money blocking their signal than
I
they,
keep
than they
telling
do
you.
helping. Yeah, I know. I get clowned for it. I deserve it.
Dude,
But my-
I have an iPhone. Like I've
They're
had an
awful.
iPhone since
They're
like the very first one. But one thing I do want to say, and like this ties into, to tie like the liability thing. I think one way that we can get cops to hold each other accountable more is like in the case of George Floyd, if the one guy that was kneeling on him was the one that actually killed him. But if every single cop there present was charged with the same crime, then I think they'd be a little bit better about policing themselves. Remove their blanket
at least as
liability
accessories?
protection.
Were they charged at all?
I think a couple of them were, but not all of them. I think that they should all be charged with homicide. And then, you have the one cop that didn't look very comfortable to be there. Like, he might have shoved him off of him if he knew, dude, I am not going to jail for your, fucking power play
Well,
here.
The problem with the police is just the structure penalizes the officers who actually turn people in.
Yeah.
And we
Internal
have turned.
affairs is
Yeah,
a
so
shit show.
God, it's a mess.
yeah, so the officers are left with, do I do what I know is ethically the right thing, knowing that will probably end my career?
And also, we deify police officers in this country. We make their jobs to seem like, oh, they're these great people. That's only on television. Because like a place like in LA, we don't call the police unless we really, really need them. And I live in the suburbs, and it's known to not call the cops unless your hair is on fire, and I have no hair.
That goes back to cop shows and like going all the way back to like Dragnet and even beyond before that, where it started with J. Edgar Hoover, and he actually appeared as himself in one thing, and all of the scripts had to be approved by the FBI before they could go through. And then as more police departments started working with the film crews, they got access to uniforms, filming locations, police cars. So it was a great deal for them for realism. But those departments then had say over the scripts, and that's where like the deification of the good cop, started getting really ingrained in, the public consciousness.
Yeah, it's propaganda, basically.
We do with the military as well.
Propaganda.
I come from a military family, and I did not realize how much propaganda I had accepted until I went overseas. And people were like, we don't, even talking to Jen, Jen, how many Australia flags do you have in your house?
None.
I have probably over like 30 or 40 American flags. just because I'm a consumer for no reason.
I think that there are two in this house right now. One is the flag from Michael's father's funeral because he was in the military. So, the triangle flag. And then one was like a small little one that, hung up next to where his ashes were stored. But it had to get put away because I didn't really want my son playing with his grandfather's ashes, and not fun times. But I just made a mask recently, actually, that I hand cut out stars and stripes, and I did half black, blue and half red, and I made like an American flag style mask, but it was kind of a joke thing. It's for Godless Engineer, for his Bro Cephas character. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar, but I basically just shipped out some more masks to GE and KC. Shout out to them. They are fucking amazing.
Yeah.
But I made one for Bro Cephas as well, and it's the American flag.
That's
but
funny.
But he wouldn't wear one.
But it would go well,
It goes well it goes with the character, but a person like that wouldn't.
Bruce's one.
Yeah, no.
Well, you had these people showing up for Trump rallies, in clothes that they made by cutting up American flags. And somebody needs to tell these people that that's actually a federal offense.
So
they talk about not desecrating the flag, but they don't have a problem of cutting it up to make a shirt.
Right,
I personally think that if flag burnings are protected free speech, then so is other forms of desecration of a flag. At the end of the day, it is a piece of property that you bought. And a lot of them are made out of plastic now.
Oh, yeah, no,
having said that, I'm not a good example of do you have an Aussie flag, because I know lots of Aussies who would have an Australian flag somewhere. I just don't, because I don't give a shit. I don't even particularly like our flag. I think it's kind of fucking boring. I'd like a really interesting one with more colours in it and less bullshit. And get rid of that Union Jack because fuck the UK.
See, but that goes back to propaganda. Like, we are fed propaganda and told like, oh, this is your flag for your country. It's not.
And it starts
Canada
manages
to be a Commonwealth country without having the fucking Union Jack in its flag. Fuck off, you.
I was like a raw, like hardcore American nationalist, and then I went from state to state. I traveled around America, and I was like, people don't like me just on sight. Like, half of America doesn't even, acknowledge my existence.
That nationalist propaganda starts young. I mean, every day in elementary school, we would have to stand, put our hand on our hearts, and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yep.
Nah.
And that's fucked up.
So I was a
Korean bullshit.
I was a Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout, and every 4th of July, we would march with the Vietnam veterans. Talk about propaganda, full uniform. I have pictures. I might post them one day out of boardom. Like,
we didn't do that as Girl Scouts.
There are two voices.
The Girl Scouts
to
were the better of the two organizations.
Yeah, they got us early. There
well, I mean, the Boy Scouts
to the Aussie national anthem. I would guess that less than 30% of Australians know what the second verse is.
Pick an American song from the early days. I could probably sing it.
But
from sea to shiny sea.
I forgot what I was going to say.
You guys have multiple songs that you treat like national anthems. and everybody knows them. And I'm like, you what? You know, most Australians wouldn't know all the verses of Waltzing Matilda.
Yeah, exactly. Junie knows it too. It's a certain age, though. Did they teach you guys all the propaganda songs when you were a kid, Junie?
I think it was just because I kept hearing it in the radio.
Propaganda work.
Yeah. It was during the time, of course, post 9/11. And,
okay.
They really did a huge
Disney of all
push.
places.
Our Prime Minister got his knickers in a knot because during one of our sports finals, a whole heap of the people in the crowd didn't bother to stand up for the national anthem, and he got really upset about it. And someone in the press gallery, when he was making his announcements, just said, "That's just fucking stupid," because that's Australian attitude to that. It's like, who cares if somebody doesn't stand up for the national anthem? Who fucking cares?
You know what's funny? At a hockey game in the Staples Center, while I was standing, someone said something about Colin Kaepernick. I turned around, told them to go F themselves, and people started clapping. So it brought my faith back into this country a little bit. And I was at a hockey game where you don't get the most, people don't say the nicest things at hockey games, you know.
Well, I mean, a lot of it, like, it's one of the reasons why Christianity has become so ingrained in American culture. Like, In God We Trust was not on the money until the 1950s, and it was in response to the Red Scare. It wasn't in the Pledge of Allegiance either. Under God was not in the Pledge of Allegiance until around the same time. I think one was like 55 and one was 58. Like, it was mid-50s.
Wow.
And a lot of people don't know that. You can actually go see an old Looney Tunes episode where Porky Pig is holding open a book that has the Pledge of Allegiance on it, and Under God's not in it because it was drawn before 1950 whatever.
Under God was added to the pledge in 1954 during the McCarthy trials to show that we were different from the godless communist.
Well, you know what's funny is growing up in Texas, we did, starting like my sophomore year of high school, I think, they started doing the Texas Pledge. And they added Under God to the Texas Pledge. It was not in it originally. So the last time I heard the Texas Pledge, they added Under God, and I'm like, wait, what?
So can I ask you a question, Susan? Did they have prayer circles at your school?
They had See You at the Pole.
Oh, they tried that at mine. They tried that here.
I participated in that, and there's a picture of me in the yearbook at See You at the Pole.
You know, I dyed my hair blonde. We all make bad decisions when we're young.
I dyed my hair black, so I feel
Government schools in Australia used to do
I've had every color.
scripture every week, where they'd have a Christian come in and teach the class scripture. It wasn't compulsory, but most kids did it. And most kids pulled the piss out of it because it created more atheists than it did.
I was about to say, because in the 90s, they tried that prayer circle thing. And I swear it created, like you said, it created more atheists because people were like, no, I'm not going to come to school early to pray when I don't even believe in it. And I was really surprised on how many people didn't participate.
The best comment there ever was about having scripture in primary school was the fact that kids would go, thank fuck we got out of that science lesson.
Well,
because you didn't have to do anything for scripture. You just sat there and listened to somebody talking bullshit.
Yeah.
The national anthem didn't actually become the national anthem until sometime in the 1900s. I forget which. And a lot of people didn't, like, not officially anyway. And a lot of people didn't want it because it was actually originally to the tune of a drinking song. And they thought that it was uncouth to, have a national anthem that was a drinking song. So it wasn't, I'll have to look it up and find out what year it was that it became the official national anthem.
Oh, and it's just like the other verses are super fucking racist too. I don't know them. I don't know them that well. I've read the lyrics. I just know they're super fucking racist. And it's like, oh god, oh that hurts my heart.
It was 1931. was when the Star Spangled Banner officially became the national anthem.
That is
1931. Wow.
Or maybe it was 1929. Like, I'm getting conflicting results here. But Woodrow Wilson adopted the song as the de facto national anthem in 1916, but did not codify this ruling. In 1929, House Resolution 14 was presented to Congress to name the Star Spangled Banner as the official national anthem to the United States. So it might not have taken effect officially until 1931, but the law to codify it was in 1929.
Wow.
So only 20 years or so before In God We Trust and Under God were added to the money and Pledge of Allegiance, respectively.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of something that I found out recently when I was looking up gun laws. In the 80s, there was mass shootings around the world, so countries started outlawing guns in general, and America was the only country left. So the gun companies started ramping it up in movies. If you look at a 1980s TV show, they're walking around with Glocks. They're walking around with real guns because they're selling them. Dirty Harry, all those movies came out in the 80s because it was nothing but propaganda for the gun companies, and it worked.
And that was when the NRA stopped being a gun club and, gun owner organization and became a lobbying tool essentially for the gun manufacturers. They stopped caring about the people that owned guns and instead cared about the gun lobby and the gun manufacturers, that is a sad thing. And honestly, if you need any proof of that fact, look at Philando Castile. He was a legal gun owner, got blown away in his fucking car by following the rules. He did what he was supposed to do, got killed anyway, and you check the fucking Twitter of the NRA, nada. They went comms blackout for like a week and then pretended like it didn't happen. It's like, if you were so worried about gun owners like being persecuted, here is a legal gun owner, but the fact that he was black, well, sorry, we don't care. They only want white people, white conservatives to own guns, to be honest. Like, they're the only ones they advocate for. Like, white liberals maybe a little bit, but it's mostly, the conservative Christian white people that they care about.
It's nothing to see. My father used to get Rifleman American. I think that's what the name was. It was nothing to see an ad for Joel Osteen next to a $6 ad. It was nothing. And I want to dig those magazines out because I still have the one when Charlton Heston died. They honored him. The NRA, they basically had his church service and everything in the magazine, and they were promoting the church. So they weren't saying like, "Oh, we endorse Christianity," but they basically do endorse Christianity only, And this is a magazine that's basically is an NRA magazine, but they call it American Rifleman.
Yeah. I'm going to interrupt here because we're coming up in 2 hours and Pep's got his stream in about an hour, so he probably needs to go and get organised and stuff. And we've also gone way off topic again. Not that I think that's a problem. I think these are all valid discussions, and I love the way we do that.
This is what we do every Thursday, though. We go way off topic.
And then do it again on Purples, yeah.
Where the fuck's the topic?
Yeah.
So it should be WTF.
I think we just should call it the What the Fuck Show, not bother having a topic anymore.
It's like, what do you want to talk about today?
What do you want to talk about today?
Wow.
All of this does tie back to bodily autonomy and personal rights and personal liberties. I mean, I could say, that Philando Castile's liberties were definitely not, he had a right to that gun, but because of the color of his skin, his right to that, his liberty was completely infringed upon.
Is there a point, though, with guns where it's kind of like masks? Your right to have a gun infringes on my right to live.
Yeah, like your right to swing only extends so far as the other person knows.
I love that quote because it's true. Like, I don't think anybody should have the right to shoot anybody. Sorry.
I don't think anybody has the right to shoot anyone. No. I mean, self-defense being like the only like exception, And even then, I don't really like stand your ground laws and castle doctrine just because it encourages somebody to be more Rambo-esque rather than having a duty to retreat and using lethal force only as a last resort.
And from I think it's mainly the insecure who want to walk around with a gun in the first place. We should question somebody. Why do you want to walk around with a gun on your hip when it's peacetime? You know?
Well, I mean, it literally, a lot of them have this fantasy that they're basically Rambo and they're just itching for the chance to use it. There was a guy in Jacksonville that he got angry at a car full of kids for playing loud rap music. And as they were driving away, he opened fire on the car.
See, that's what I'm saying. He's not mentally fit to have a gun.
No, he's absolutely not.
And
I don't care if they called him a honky. I don't care what they might have said.
And encouraging people to have mental health care.
Yes.
That's like when I watched that. I watched a documentary and a reporter walked into a Virginia gun store and got a gun within like a half an hour.
A gun store, and I was going, what?
It's my accent. But he walked into a gun store in Virginia and got a gun within a half an hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah, see, I'm fine with waiting times. Like here in Florida, it's a 3-day wait period to buy a handgun. If you want to buy like a shotgun or a rifle, there isn't a wait time. But for a handgun, unless you have a concealed weapons permit, if you have a concealed weapons permit, it means that the background check has already been done on you and you can go in, buy it, and walk out. But it's basically the 3 days is to give enough time for the database to be run, basically to do a background check and make sure that you're legally allowed to buy the gun. But that's only if it's bought from a licensed gun dealer, as opposed to, there are ways to get around those types of background checks, like transferring from one person to another in a private sale. Loopholes. And the gun show loopholes as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was trying to... We'll wind up. Sorry. That's right.
It happens every time.
I want to thank all our guests. Thank you, Kitty. Are you up on anyone else's streams this week?
I don't think so. I think
although I do want us to do our stream about because I didn't have a chance to organise it for this week, but I do want to do our stream about domestic violence, because I think
just let me know.
We really need to talk about, and it's a good subject.
Depending on what time for me and what day.
I will DM you about it and we'll get that organised. So look out for that one, people. That will hopefully come up in the next week.
It's going to be heavy though, so maybe bring a glass of wine. And trigger warning.
Trigger warnings, yes. Definitely trigger warnings everywhere. Susan, you guys have backed off from doing, but I know she did a stream the other day, so your back off didn't last for long.
It's weird. It's just weird. Like, we have some stuff we're technically finishing up. Like, we have some stuff on Tom Osborne, who's the Nebraska football coach for a very long time, who was actually a really shitty person. We have stuff that we're supposed to be finishing on the Lucan census, like a census of Quirinius, as mentioned in the Gospel of Luke, according to Inspiring Philosophy, who is a piece of trash. So
there's still videos coming from Divine Disbelief for a while.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully you have the long term, because your content's worth it.
Thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. And then the kitty.
And the kitties. The kitties are always worth it.
Thank you.
I'd have mine in here, but they don't stay on your lap. They bugger off and run around the room.
She just likes stealing my body warmth. That's the thing.
Okay.
Like, she doesn't love me. She just steals my body warmth.
Well, you know what they say. Dogs have owners, cats have staff.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is accurate.
Jenny, what have you got coming up?
I'm still working on a couple more projects here and there, but it's not much necessarily. I do want to encourage, however, everybody to whatever side you are, educate yourself. I walked in, I accepted coming here initially, not knowing exactly what the term bodily autonomy means, and it doesn't take much more than a few seconds to look up in your phone or computer to see what that actually means itself. And because at first I thought autonomy meant, and it's just things that
Body
happen
moving
without
automatically.
human internet. Yeah, right. The things that happen without actual intervention, or human intervention. But turns out it's quite the opposite. So, so
Oxymoron.
It's a rabbit hole.
right.
Rabbit hole, yeah.
And so every point that we've made today, I was, I'm happy that was brought up.
Yeah.
And of course, we can talk a whole lot more.
Oh, and we probably will.
Yes. So yeah, educate yourselves.
I mean,
out there,
last week's
take the
discussion
time.
was gun control, and we finished this one on gun control. So.
Yes.
And subscribe to Uni. They make amazing content.
Everybody's links is down in the description. Perp, if you want to shove a link to your stream, which is coming up in about 50 minutes, in the chat.
Oh yeah.
Please feel free. And yes, please follow everyone in here on Twitter and subscribe to their YouTube channels and all that. And Perp, want to talk about your show today? Your other projects.
Yeah, don't have a lot going on, just my chats.
Yeah.
I was actually going to sit this discussion out because I know the body autonomy issues are big things to trans people, especially, and to women. But since I appear as a typical white male, it's not something I've personally run into a lot of issues
I
with.
think it is important for men too, though, because especially when you
Well,
talk
it
about
is important.
drugs,
I'm just saying that men don't face
circumcision.
problems with it as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is still there. There's still issues. Yeah, certainly there is more issues for women and trans folks. Anyone who's a minority, the issues of body autonomy are huge. But men are still
anyone
affected
who's
by
not
it.
a WASP male.
In LA, we had to tell the cops that they don't have the right to walk up and grab people of color for no reason. It was a thing, so that's big. Don't touch me just because I'm walking down the street and you think I'm a suspect. We had to remind them.
I should mention that tonight's going to be kind of an unusual chat for me because I actually have a topic that a lot of atheists care about.
Absolutely.
That today is Darwin Day, or it will be Darwin Day in an hour.
Awesome.
Nice.
Oh, and
I'll see if I can catch up with that.
Today, there's now is International Day of Women in Science. So I was going to do something about
Awesome.
that, but
I love that.
didn't have a chance to. So
See, I love that. It even says love on my nails.
Oh,
on Valentine's
That's
Day, of course. Sorry. Well, coming up.
Well, that's why I did the heart frame, was because Valentine's Day is this weekend.
Yeah, this weekend.
Reminder, if you haven't gotten something for your partner, Valentine's Day is Sunday.
I told Will he wasn't allowed to send me a birthday or a Christmas present. I'm not going to let him send me internationally something for Valentine's Day. Sorry.
As an autosexual, I'm getting myself a lot of things.
Oh yeah. Hey, Adam and Eve might have a coupon code. Just saying.
Glory at checkout, just like a cognitive dissonance. So theirs is a glory at checkout.
Unfortunately, there is a lot of
saying.
conflict with this. Nope. Valentine's Day is one of the artificial holidays that it's kind of like you don't really want to participate, but people feel slighted if you don't. So,
yeah.
Just do what my parents did. They celebrated Valentine's Day on the 14th the first year, but then they did it on the 15th every year after so they could get the discounted candy.
Smart.
As for
200 IQ play.
Yeah,
as for myself
because
and
of
Will.
COVID,
Yeah, sorry. Go on, Pip.
Oh, because of COVID, all the gaming conventions have been suspended. But one of the interesting notes is that the Con of the North Gaming Convention is always the second weekend in February, unless Valentine's Day falls on that weekend, in which case it's postponed to the next weekend. Because any of the organizers that have wives or girlfriends didn't want to risk that conflict.
Oh, that's forced. That's a forced holiday.
I think it's fine if you want to celebrate it, but no one should make you feel obligated. It should definitely be one of those discussions you have with your significant other, because I think with your own autonomy, like cultural expectations should not be forced on anyone. And if you want to celebrate Valentine's Day as a couple, go for it. If you don't. Like, honestly, it doesn't matter one way or the other. Whatever makes you happy.
I think you've just labelled next week's topic. I think next Friday we'll be talking about cultural expectations.
Ooh,
that's a good one. Because I wanted to talk
one.
about. I wanted to talk about double standards, but that kind of ties.
And as part of that, we can talk about cultural appropriation as well.
Ooh, I have a video about that.
I know you do.
I'm down.
I've actually seen that.
So that will be next week's shows. All about
I might even do some goth makeup instead of pretty like glam makeup, just because fuck cultural expectations.
There you go.
Exactly.
I think I could talk about cultural expectations.
I think I
could
could
speak on that.
Aside from that, there'll be the roundtable discussion that Kitty and I are organising for domestic abuse. We'll also, I possibly, maybe this week, but maybe not till the week after, Will and I are looking at doing a What the Fuck show that's just about music. That and we're hoping that we're hoping to cover heavy metal for our first.
Well, see, I'm classically trained, so we could talk about almost anything.
Yeah, and I'm eclectic as far as music
Pirates
goes
of Penzance. If you we want to sing show tunes, we can do that.
I can sing the entirety of Hamilton.
But the aim is to go through different music styles in different shows, and we're going to have guests on who are interested in that style of music, and we're going to talk about it. We've even got a few people in mind and lined up who are either in industry or industry adjacent for certain topics. So it should be.
I can talk about country music that's not Nashville country, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Ooh, like what? Like
Johnny definitely
Horton?
Doing country music. We'll also do jazz and blues and show tunes and
classic
musicals
rock,
and
please.
Classic, yeah, definitely.
Maybe some EDM.
Yeah,
there you
maybe
go.
some punk rock, and get some
definitely
Panic at the Disco
punk
up
rock,
in here.
We'll have to dress for it, Kitty. We got to dress for punk rock.
Ooh, yes.
Look, in the end,
I will do some awesome, just fucking scene makeup. It'll be great.
I'll put some pink and purple through my hair.
I'm already doing my hair pink.
Yes.
So,
Awesome.
I might even dye the ends of my hair purple for that. We'll see.
Yeah. So
a lot of my
think we'll have
favorite
fun
music
with that,
falls in a very specific niche.
We haven't decided when that will be. That'll be separate from this show. So we've actually got an intro designed for that as well. So it's be its own show in and of itself and just covering music, but it's the What the Fuck. It'll be the What the Fuck music show.
Because there's so many genres.
There's so many genres. We love
just
music,
right
so
now.
we want to do that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's something that people can keep an eye out for. I don't know if Will had anything else to add because I've lost track of where I was talking.
No, be here next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.
I do want to add: wear a mask, wash your hands, socially distance. Don't be a dick.
Absolutely.
And I think we can
And
all
don't
agree with
pick
that.
nose.
yeah, the other side can't say this is my body, my choice.
Yeah,
My
masks are
body, my
exempted from
choice.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you're talking, you're spraying your spit at me, so that invades my body.
Well,
true.
And that's where your body autonomy ends. If your body autonomy, if your right for your body autonomy invades somebody else's body autonomy, then you're doing it wrong.
I mean, I take a hardcore stance on anti-vaxxers in that I think that if you refuse to vaccinate your child for something other than a medical, like say they have an egg allergy or they're immunocompromised or, going through chemo, if there's no medical reason for your child not to be vaccinated and you don't vaccinate them, you get popped with negligence. If your kid gets another kid sick, another kind of negligence. If one of them dies, negligent homicide. I don't fuck around with that.
No, I agree with you because that kid could get me sick because I have a lower immune system because I'm
and that's
born
one of the
asthmatic.
case where your rights for bodily autonomy, I can't say it now.
Autonomy
are infringing on somebody else's because you choosing not to be vaccinated is actually putting other people's bodily rights in jeopardy.
You are
Your
potentially
autonomy ends
becoming
at
a
the tip
public
of your
health
nose.
hazard that could infect could infect hundreds of people.
So
Just
there
like
is
your religious.
the point.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, good kitty.
No, I was going to say, just like your religious beliefs, your bodily autonomy ends at the tip of your nose. It should not and cannot have any impact on others. The minute it does, then that's a whole different conversation. And it's not just about your body, your choice, because you are making a choice for others that they are not choosing for themselves.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I think we can end on that. So, again, thank you all for being absolutely wonderful guests. Everybody's links are below in the descriptions, except Will, so I probably should do something about that.
You get away with it because it's your partner.
Yeah, and we're mostly using my channel. Although we are looking at doing the What the Fuck Music Show actually on Will's channel, so instead of mine, so different type of content. So, but we'll figure that one out. Again, thank you all. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You've all been amazing, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.
Take care.